In the 11th and 10th centuries, the Mongols created the largest land empire in the history of mankind. In its extreme manifestation, the Mongol Empire stretched from the coast of China along the northern border of the Himalayas, encompassing a large part of the modern Middle East. From Persia to the Black Sea, a large part of southern Russia and Ukraine, and Europe as far as the gates of Vienna. This was achieved mostly on foot or by horse-drawn vehicles, and the most famous method was on horseback. By the time the Mongols reached the eastern borders of Ukraine in the late 1200s, some of their armies numbered 100,000 people, but it was not their numbers that were the main weapon of the Mongols, it was terror. The policy of terror was initiated by their first great ruler, the infamous Genghis Khan. However, he is not universally infamous everywhere. The Great Khan, as he is also called, is still a national hero in Mongolia. Khan means ruler or leader, and Genghis Khan means universal ruler. The Mongols ruled such a vast empire that this name can hardly be an exaggeration. Even before Genghis came to power, their society was as cruel as the Vikings. On the other side of the globe, the Mongols were often notorious for violently killing their fellow Mongols, especially when it came to the ruling class or those who wanted to rule. The elimination of all other family members guaranteed that their children would inherit their parents' position and power. Genghis's real name was Temujin, which means of iron, just like a certain Soviet leader 700 years later. Temujin killed his first person at the age of 14, and it was his stepbrother. In many stories about this episode, it is said that his older stepbrother, Yochibekta, stole a fish that Temujin killed for dinner and ate it himself, refusing to share with the family. Soon after, Temujin secretly followed Bekta, waited until he was alone, and shot him with the famous Mongolian bow. Another version of this story states that Bekta, as the older brother, began ordering people around, which caused dissatisfaction among Jin's people and his younger brother, Khosar. Food might have been involved in this version, or maybe not. But in this version, Mujin simply used Bekta's greed to kill him and take control of the clan. There was nothing unexpected or unusual about this. Upon learning of Bekta's death, she mostly just scolded her son, the murderer. Life was difficult during the time of Genghis Khan, who lived approximately from 1162 to 1215 AD. Genghis became the Khan of all Mongols at the age of around 44, but he was already a promising military commander at the age of 20, leading his clan's army. One of the first things Genghis Khan did with his army was seek revenge for his father's murder. Get used to the fact that in the life of Genghis Khan and the Mongols, there were horribly many killings. Jin's father was killed by a group of Tatars who had a rather sad history. They were expelled by the Mongols to the west, settled in southern Russia, Ukraine, and Iran, and were massively deported by Stalin for refusing to follow his dictatorship. Hundreds of years before that, they encountered another dictator, Genghis Khan, whose father was poisoned by Tatars at a wedding. 11 years later, Mujin broke the main Tatar army in camp, killing many in battle and taking thousands of men, women, and children as collective punishment for his father's murder. Esegui. Genghis ordered the killing of everyone older than a certain age to show that he meant business. Genghis approached a carriage and marked the height on its wheel with 3 feet, and everyone was killed except for children and infants. Yes, there were pyramids in China once. They were built, if you will, by the Mongols as a lesson to anyone who thought to oppose them. The Mongol pyramids were erected by order of Genghis Khan in 1215 and were built outside the city of Beijing after a 3-year siege by the Mongols. The siege of Beijing forced its inhabitants to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. Most likely they would not have survived anyway, as Genghis subjected tens of thousands of them to the death penalty. Travelers and diplomats who saw them swore that they saw pyramids in the distance, which were indeed pyramids made of human skulls, possibly measuring 50 feet or more in height. There were many pyramids during Genghis's lifetime and after him. The Mongols acted according to a certain pattern. As they approached an enemy city, they would send an offer along with a warning, essentially saying, "Surrender and you will be practically unharmed. But if you resist, we will kill all of you." According to estimates, during Genghis's lifetime and his relatively short tenure as the supreme ruler, 5 to 10% of the world's population was killed or died as a result of his campaigns. Do not forget that the Mongols traveled on horseback, and their main weapons were swords and bows. It was a bloody slaughter, face to face. Just like the female black widow spider devours the male after mating, the daughters of Genghis Khan played the role of black widows with those they were married off to. Marriages among ruling Mongols, their allies and opponents, were very similar in character to what you may have read about medieval Europe. Daughters were commodities. They could be married off to consolidate relationships between alliances or end wars. In the case of Genghis's numerous daughters, they could put an end to one dynasty and start another. Entering into a marriage within the great Khan's family endowed the groom and his family with prestige and power. Usually this power and prestige were short-lived because, in exchange for marriage to Genghis's family, the ruler of the tribe had to get rid of all his other wives. The line of Genghis had to inherit the throne. There could be no heirs from other lines. Afterwards, the groom would be promoted to a high command position on the front lines of the army, where almost all of them would perish. So who would rule the country until the sons became old enough? Correct, the daughters of Genghis. With each death, the empire of Genghis expanded, and there was no doubt about who his daughters received orders from. The people of Khwarezm inhabited the territory north of modern-day Iran for some time before the arrival of Genghis. They had a powerful and developed empire in this region. What remains of their civilization attests to their advanced architectural and mathematical abilities. Unfortunately for Khwarezm, this is almost all that is left. You see, when the troops of the Khan approached the capital of Khwarezm, he behaved peacefully and in general, was there another way? The Scythia people who roamed the steppes on the border of Khwarezm existed. The Scythia were conquered by the Mongols, and Genghis Khan expected them to send troops to help destroy Khwarezm, but they didn't. Soon after Genghis learned of their disobedience, he sent an army to deal with the Scythia, and they were all killed. In fact, people would not even know about the Scythia if stories about them had not been preserved in the oral histories of the surrounding inhabitants. So many people were killed that the Scythia language was destroyed for several hundred years. Before historians found the carved stones with an unfamiliar language, after careful study, they realized that only traces remained of the once flourishing culture in the form of several carved stones. It is possible that the Scythians were able to take final revenge as a result of this battle. Genghis Khan was knocked off his horse and died from his injuries in 1215. Genghis's body was taken back to his homeland for burial. Rumors say that his tomb contained so much treasure that many people were interested in finding it. Today, historians believe that it is more likely that he was buried in a traditional, simple Mongolian tomb to prevent anyone from desecrating the tomb of the most powerful conqueror the world had ever seen. Furthermore, anyone who witnessed or knew the location of the tomb was also killed, so no one could be certain of its whereabouts. Mongolians believe that someday the Khan of Khans will rise again and bring them to greatness if the tomb remains untouched.